Before we begin, if you're finding value in these law enforcement stories, please take a moment to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps us continue bringing you these accounts from the highways and backroads of America. And I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. Now, let's get into this story from the Texas desert. My name is Jake Martinez, and I spent 17 years as a Texas Highway Patrol officer before everything I knew about time, fate, and reality came crashing down on a stretch of desert highway that most people drive through without a second thought. This happened in 1999, before smartphones, before dash cams were standard, before anyone would believe what I'm about to tell you. I was 42 years old that summer, stationed out of Van Horn, a small town in far west Texas, where I-10 cuts through the Chihuahuan Desert like a scar across the earth. If you've driven from El Paso to San Antonio, you've been through my territory. That long, straight stretch where the horizon seems to go on forever, where the heat makes the asphalt shimmer, where you can drive for an hour and see maybe 3 other vehicles. It's beautiful in its own harsh way, but it's also relentless, the kind of landscape that doesn't forgive mistakes. I'd been divorced for 3 years by then. My daughter Elena was 16, living with her mother in Austin, and we weren't talking much. My ex-wife said I loved the highway more than I loved my family, and maybe she was right. There was something about being out there, alone with the road and the radio chatter, that made sense to me in a way that domestic life never had. Out here, the rules were clear. Speed limits, traffic laws, right and wrong. No gray areas, no complications. Or so I thought. It started on a Tuesday in late July. I was working the day shift, which meant I'd left Van Horn at 6 a.m. when it was still relatively cool, maybe 85 degrees. By noon, it would be over 100, the kind of heat that makes you feel like you're standing in front of an open oven. I was driving east on I-10, approaching mile marker 140, when I first saw it. At first, I thought it was a mirage. The heat does that sometimes. Makes you see things that aren't there. Water on the road, buildings in the distance, that sort of thing. But this was different. This was a vehicle, a semi-truck, traveling in the same direction as me, about a quarter mile ahead. I could see it clearly through the heat shimmer, a big rig hauling what looked like a flatbed trailer. The strange thing was, I'd been on this stretch for the past 20 minutes, and I hadn't passed any trucks. I would have remembered. You remember every vehicle you see out here because there are so few of them. I accelerated, closing the distance. My radar gun was calibrated. My radio was working fine. Everything was normal, except the truck ahead of me wasn't on my radar. The screen showed clear highway, no vehicles within range. I blinked, checked again. Still nothing on radar. But I could see the truck plain as day. I got closer, maybe 100 yards behind it now. The truck was a faded red color, older model, the kind you don't see much anymore. And then I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The truck was slightly transparent, not completely, but enough that I could see the highway through it, like looking through tinted glass. I grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 47, Jake Martinez. I've got a weird situation here at mile marker 142, eastbound I-10. Go ahead, Unit 47. I'm seeing a vehicle ahead of me. Appears to be a semi-truck, but it's not showing up on radar, and it looks translucent, like a ghost." There was a pause. "Unit 47, can you repeat that?" "The truck ahead of me is see-through. I can see the highway through it." Another pause, longer this time. "Unit 47, have you been experiencing any medical issues? Dizziness? Vision problems?" "Negative, dispatch, I'm fine, but this truck is definitely not normal." "Acknowledged. We're showing clear highway on our traffic cams. No trucks in your vicinity. Advise you pull over and take a break. Possible heat-related. I released the radio button. Heat hallucination. That's what they thought. Maybe they were right. But the truck was still there, and as I watched, it started to drift toward the shoulder. Not quickly, just a gradual movement, like the driver was falling asleep. And then it happened. The ghost truck crossed the white line, kept drifting, and went off the road. It hit the soft shoulder and started to tip. I watched, frozen, as the truck rolled in slow motion, the trailer jackknifing, the whole rig tumbling down the embankment in complete silence. No screech of brakes, no crash of metal, nothing. Just a silent, dreamlike accident. The truck came to rest at the bottom of the embankment, lying on its side, and then it faded. Like smoke dispersing in wind, it just disappeared. I pulled over, my heart pounding. I sat there for a full minute, trying to process what I'd just seen. Then I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the embankment. Nothing. No truck, no debris, no tire marks. Just empty desert. I was about to call it in as a confirmed hallucination when I checked my watch. 12:17 p.m. I made a note of it in my logbook, along with the mile marker. Then I got back on the highway and continued my patrol, trying to convince myself it had been the heat, a trick of the light, exhaustion, anything rational. 15 minutes later, at 12:32 p.m., I came around a gentle curve near mile marker 145. And there it was. A semi-truck, faded red, older model, lying on its side at the bottom of the embankment. Real, solid, with fresh tire marks leading off the road, emergency flashers blinking, diesel fuel leaking from the tank. The exact same truck I'd seen crash 15 minutes earlier. I pulled over, hit my lights and radio. Dispatch, Unit 47, I've got a single vehicle accident, mile marker 145 eastbound. Semi rolled down embankment, requesting EMS and fire response. Copy Unit 47, units en route. Any injuries? Checking now. I grabbed my first aid kit and scrambled down the embankment. The driver's door was facing up, and I could see movement inside. I climbed up the side of the cab and pulled the door open. The driver was a man in his 50s, dazed but conscious, blood running from a cut on his forehead. He looked up at me with confused eyes. What happened? You went off the road. Just stay still. Help is coming. Are you hurt anywhere else? He did a mental inventory. My shoulder and my leg, but I can move everything. Good. Don't try to climb out. Let the paramedics stabilize you first. I stayed with him until the ambulance arrived. As the EMTs were extracting him, I walked the accident scene, documenting everything. The tire marks showed he'd drifted gradually to the right, exactly like I'd seen in the ghost truck. No brake marks, suggesting he'd fallen asleep at the wheel. I checked my notes. First sighting at mile marker 142, 12:17 p.m. Actual accident at mile marker 145, 12:32 p.m. 15 minutes later, 3 miles down the road. The math worked out perfectly if the truck had been traveling at the speed limit, which was 75. In 15 minutes at 75 miles per hour, you travel 18.75 miles. But the ghost truck hadn't traveled that far. It had only moved 3 miles. Unless the ghost truck was traveling slower. If it had been going 15 miles per hour, it would cover 3 miles in 12 minutes, close enough to 15 with some variance. But why would I see a ghost truck traveling at a different speed than real time? I didn't have an answer. And when I filed my incident report that night, I left out the part about seeing the accident before it happened. Who would believe me? Over the next few days, I kept watching for ghost vehicles, for transparent cars, for anything unusual. The highway looked normal during the day, but at certain times, In certain light conditions, I started to see them. Always transparent. Always exactly 15 minutes ahead of their real-world counterparts. I tested it obsessively. When I saw a ghost vehicle, I'd note the time and location. 15 minutes later, like clockwork, the real vehicle would appear in the same spot. It wasn't just trucks. Cars, motorcycles, even the occasional RV, all of them casting these strange shadows forward in time. And I was the only one who could see them. I kept this to myself for a week, documenting everything in a private notebook. Times, locations, vehicle descriptions. The pattern was consistent. The ghost vehicles appeared exactly 15 minutes before their real versions. Always on I-10, always in that long, straight stretch between Van Horn and Fort Stockton. Then I started to wonder, if I could see accidents before they happened, could I prevent them? The opportunity came on a Friday afternoon. I saw a ghost motorcycle riding way too fast, weaving between lanes. I watched as it lost control, high-sided, and the rider was thrown across 3 lanes of traffic. The ghost rider hit the pavement and didn't move. I checked my watch. 3:47 p.m. Mile marker 167. I floored it, racing ahead to mile marker 167. I got there with 12 minutes to spare and positioned my unit across the right lane, lights flashing. Then I waited. At exactly 4:02 p.m., the motorcycle appeared on the horizon. Same bike, same rider, going way too fast. When he saw my lights, he slowed down. I waved him over to the shoulder. He pulled over, confused and irritated. Young kid, maybe 22, wearing a tank top and jeans, no helmet. "License and registration," I said. "What did I do? I wasn't speeding." "You were doing 90 in a 75, license and registration." He handed them over, sullen. While I ran his information, I gave him the safety lecture. Speeding on a bike without a helmet. How he could end up splattered across the highway, how I'd seen too many motorcycle fatalities. I gave him a ticket for speeding and a warning about the helmet. He rode off, slower this time, pissed off, but alive. I'd changed it. I'd seen the future and changed it. The implications hit me like a physical force. If I could see 15 minutes into the future, if I could prevent accidents, save lives, I had a responsibility to do it. This wasn't a curse. It was a gift. I started using it. Every shift, I'd watch for ghost vehicles, for accidents waiting to happen. I prevented 17 accidents over the next 2 weeks. Pile-ups, rollovers, head-on collisions. I'd see them in the ghost highway, then race ahead and change something. Pull someone over, create a traffic break, radio for backup to divert the traffic. My captain noticed. "Martinez, your accident response time has been incredible lately. What's your secret?" "Just paying attention, sir. Reading the traffic." "Well, keep it up. District's never seen numbers like this." I felt good, like I'd finally found my purpose. This was what I was meant to do. Then I saw the murder. It was a Wednesday evening, just before sunset. I was on patrol near mile marker 178 when I saw 2 ghost vehicles pull onto the shoulder, one behind the other. A sedan and a pickup truck. I watched as 2 ghost figures got out of the sedan, a man and a woman, arguing. The body language was angry, aggressive. Then the pickup driver got out. A large man moving quickly. He pulled something from his waistband. A gun. I watched, frozen, as the ghost man with the gun shot the arguing man 3 times. The victim crumpled. The woman screamed silently. The shooter got back in his truck and drove away. The whole thing took maybe 90 seconds. I checked my watch, 7:23 p.m. I had 15 minutes. I grabbed my radio, my hands shaking. "Dispatch, Unit 47, I need immediate backup at mile marker 178 eastbound. Shots fired, 1 victim down, suspect fleeing in a pickup truck." Unit 47, can you confirm shots fired? Affirmative, I witnessed the shooting. Copy. All units respond to mile marker 178, shots fired. I waited, my service weapon drawn, watching the empty highway. At 7:30 p.m., two vehicles appeared on the horizon, a sedan and a pickup truck. They pulled onto the shoulder, one behind the other. This was it. I could stop this. I could save that man's life. I hit my lights and sirens, pulling up behind them. I got out, weapon ready. The sedan's doors opened. A man and woman got out looking confused and scared. The pickup driver stayed in his vehicle. "Sir, ma'am, I need you both to get back in your vehicle immediately," I shouted. "Officer, what's going on?" the man asked. "We just stopped to get back in your vehicle now. This is an active situation." The pickup door opened, the large man stepped out, and I could see his right hand moving to his waistband. "Sir, hands where I can see them." He froze. For a long moment, we stared at each other. I could see the calculation in his eyes, the decision forming. Then he raised both hands slowly. "On the ground, now. Face down, hands behind your head." He complied. I approached carefully, called for the man and woman to stay in their car, and cuffed the shooter. When I patted him down, I found a loaded 9mm in his waistband. Backup arrived within minutes. We arrested the shooter, took statements from the couple in the sedan. Turns out the shooter was the woman's ex-boyfriend, had been stalking her, had followed them from El Paso planning to kill the new boyfriend. The shooting never happened. The man was alive, scared but unharmed. I'd stopped a murder, but as the adrenaline faded and we processed the scene, a terrible realization crept over me. I'd seen the murder in the ghost highway. I'd seen it happen exactly as it would have happened. The shooter pulling the gun, firing 3 times, driving away, but I'd changed it. I'd stopped it, which meant the ghost highway didn't show an unchangeable future. It showed what would happen if I didn't interfere. Or did it? What if the ghost highway showed what was supposed to happen, and by changing it, I'd created a paradox? I drove back to the station that night, my mind churning. I'd been assuming the ghost highway was just a preview, a warning system. But what if it was more than that? What if it was showing me destiny, and by changing these events I was breaking something fundamental? The questions kept me up all night. Over the next week I tested my theory. When I saw minor ghost accidents, I didn't interfere. I watched as they played out exactly as the ghost highway had shown. Perfect predictions, down to the second. When I did interfere, the outcome changed. But sometimes in unexpected ways. I stopped a ghost accident where a car was going to rear-end a semi. I pulled the car over 5 minutes early, gave the driver a warning about following too close. The accident didn't happen at mile marker 178 like I'd seen. Instead, a different accident happened at mile marker 182. The same car, same driver, but this time a side-impact collision with a pickup truck that ran a red light at a highway intersection. I'd delayed the accident, moved it, but I hadn't prevented it entirely. The universe, it seemed, had a way of course-correcting. This realization troubled me deeply. If changing the future just meant delaying the inevitable, what was the point? Was I really saving people, or just postponing their fate? I was wrestling with these questions on a hot Monday afternoon, when I saw something that made everything else irrelevant. I was at mile marker 195, watching traffic, when a ghost highway patrol unit appeared on the shoulder. My unit, Unit 47. I watched as the ghost officer, me, got out and approached a stopped vehicle. A routine traffic stop. And then I watched as the driver of the stopped vehicle pulled a gun and shot me 3 times. I watched myself fall. Watched the shooter get back in his car and drive away. I checked my watch. 2:17 p.m. I had 15 minutes until I died. The ghost highway patrol unit faded. The ghost me lying on the ground faded. Everything disappeared, leaving just the empty highway and the afternoon sun. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. This was different from the other visions. Those had been strangers, people I was trying to help. But this was me, my death, my destiny. Could I change it? If I avoided that mile marker, stayed away from that traffic stop, would I survive? Or would the universe just find another way to kill me 15 minutes from now? I sat in my unit, frozen with indecision. Part of me wanted to drive away, to run, to get as far from mile marker 195 as possible. But another part, the part that had been a cop for 15 years, knew that running from your own death wasn't that simple. If the ghost highway was showing me what would happen, then, somewhere on I-10, a driver with a gun was heading this way, and in 15 minutes we were going to meet. The question was, could I change the script? I had to try. I started driving, heading west, away from mile marker 195. If I wasn't at that location, the stop couldn't happen. The shooting couldn't happen. But as I drove, I saw him. A sedan traveling east, coming toward me. And in the shimmer of the heat, I could see his ghost. A man, mid-30s, with dead eyes and a gun in his lap. He was the shooter. And he was on this highway right now. Our paths were going to cross. The ghost highway had shown me where and when. But I was changing the where. I was going in the opposite direction. The sedan passed me, heading east. I watched it in my rearview mirror, my heart pounding. I'd avoided him. I'd changed it. I pulled over, checked my watch. 2:28 p.m. 4 minutes passed when I was supposed to die. I was alive. I'd beaten it. I sat there, relief washing over me, my hands still shaking. I'd seen my own death, and I'd avoided it. The ghost highway had been wrong. Destiny could be changed. That's when my radio crackled. All units, officer down. Mile marker 195 eastbound. Repeat, officer down. Shots fired. My blood went cold. Dispatch, this is Unit 47. Can you identify the officer? Unit 47, it's Officer Linda Barrow, Unit 52. She responded to a suspicious vehicle at mile marker 195. Witnesses report shots fired. Officer down. Where are you? Linda, my partner, my friend. She'd been behind me on patrol, covering the next sector. When I'd driven away from mile marker 195, she'd been the next unit to respond. She'd taken the call I was supposed to take. She'd made the stop I was supposed to make. And now she was the one who'd been shot. I'd changed my death, but death had still happened. Just to someone else. The universe had course-corrected. I turned my unit around and floored it, racing back to mile marker 195. But I already knew what I'd find. The ghost highway had shown me the truth 15 minutes early. And the truth, I was beginning to understand, was that you can't cheat fate. You can only choose who pays the price. Linda survived. 3 bullets, 2 in the vest, 1 through her shoulder. She was in surgery for 6 hours, but she made it. I sat in the hospital waiting room in El Paso, staring at my hands, trying to understand what I'd done. I'd seen my own death coming, and I'd run from it. And because I ran, Linda had taken my place. Captain Reeves found me there around midnight. Martinez, Linda's stable. Doctors say she'll make a full recovery. I nodded, unable to speak. The shooter's in custody. Wanted for armed robbery in New Mexico. Had a warrant. Linda ran his plates, called for backup, approached the vehicle. He panicked and opened fire. Reeves sat down heavily beside me. This wasn't your fault, Jake. I was supposed to be there. You were west of that position. Linda was closer. She took the call. That's how it works. But it wasn't how it worked. Not really. I was supposed to die at 2:32 p.m. at mile marker 195. The ghost highway had shown me. But I'd changed my position, changed the variables, and Linda had taken my bullet. The universe had demanded a sacrifice, and it had taken one. Just not from me. I visited Linda 2 days later. She was awake, groggy from pain meds, her shoulder heavily bandaged. "Hey, partner," she said, managing a weak smile. "Heard you're beating yourself up about this. I should have been there. You were on patrol 20 miles west. Nothing you could have done." She shifted in the bed, wincing. "Jake, it's the job. We both knew the risks when we signed up. This is on the shooter, not on you." But she was wrong. It was on me, because I'd seen it coming and I'd saved myself instead of her. I couldn't tell her that. I couldn't tell anyone. Over the next week, I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Linda's shooting wasn't connected to my ghost vision. Destiny didn't work that way. The universe wasn't some cosmic bookkeeper keeping death tallies balanced. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I saw the ghost highway, every time I glimpsed those transparent vehicles, I wondered, if I change one fate, whose fate changes instead? I stopped interfering. When I saw ghost accidents, I just watched. Let them happen. 17 saves over 2 weeks, and then nothing. My numbers went back to normal. Captain Reeves noticed but didn't say anything. I couldn't risk it. Couldn't risk saving someone only to have someone else die in their place. But the ghost highway didn't care about my moral crisis. It kept showing me the future, 15 minutes at a time, whether I wanted to see it or not. And then, 3 weeks after Linda's shooting, I met Ray Dobbs. I was at a truck stop near Van Horn, filling up my unit, when an old man approached me. He had to be in his 80s, maybe older, with skin like weathered leather and eyes that were far too alert for his age. "You're the one who sees them," he said. Not a question. I turned, my hand instinctively moving toward my weapon. "Excuse me?" "The shadow vehicles, the ghost highway. You can see 15 minutes ahead." He tapped his temple with a gnarled finger. "I can see it in your eyes. Same look I had for 30 years. I stared at him. "Who are you?" "Ray Dobbs. I was a state trooper back in the 50s and 60s. Worked the same stretch of I-10, back when it was just Highway 80. And I saw the same thing you're seeing now." My heart was pounding. "You saw the ghost highway?" "Every day for 3 decades. Started in the summer of 1952, right after the atomic tests." "Atomic tests?" Ray gestured toward the west. "Nevada test site, 200 miles that way. They were setting off nukes in the desert every other week back then. Big ones, small ones, underground, above ground. The whole desert was hot with radiation." He pulled out a cigarette, lit it with shaking hands. Something about the radiation, or the blast waves, or maybe just the sheer wrongness of splitting atoms in the desert. It did something to the fabric of reality around here. Created a fold, a wrinkle. The locals called it different things. The shimmer, the echo road. I called it the shadow line. You could see 15 minutes into the future. Just like me. Exactly like you. Down to the minute. And I'm guessing you've already learned the hard truth. You can't change it. Not really. You can move it, delay it, transfer it, but you can't stop what the shadow line shows you. Fate finds a way. I thought about Linda, about the bullet that was meant for me. "How did you deal with it?" "I didn't. I just watched. Saw hundreds of accidents, dozens of deaths, and I didn't lift a finger to stop them. Because every time I tried, the universe just shifted the weight. Saved one life, lost another. After a while, I realized the best thing I could do was nothing. That's not acceptable. No, it's not. But it's reality. Ray took a long drag on his cigarette. The shadow line isn't a gift, son. It's a curse. It shows you just enough to think you can make a difference, but not enough to actually change anything that matters. You'll drive yourself crazy trying to outsmart it. There has to be a way, a loophole. Ray laughed, a bitter sound. I thought that too. Spent 30 years looking for one. You know what I found? Nothing. The shadow line is absolute. It shows you what will happen, and what will happen happens. The only variable is who it happens to. What do you mean? I mean, the shadow line shows outcomes, not actors. It shows a death at mile marker 195 at 2:32 p.m. Doesn't specify who dies, just that someone does. You moved yourself out of position. Your partner moved in. The death happened on schedule, just with a different name attached. He stubbed out his cigarette. That's the only choice the shadow line gives you. Who pays the price? But the price gets paid, one way or another. I felt sick. So every time I save someone else takes their place. Maybe not immediately, maybe not obviously, but the balance gets corrected. Conservation of tragedy. The universe keeps its books clean. I can't accept that. You don't have to accept it, but you can't change it either. Ray pulled out a worn photograph and handed it to me. That's my daughter, Mary. She died in a car accident in 1967. I saw it in the shadow line 15 minutes before it happened. Tried to stop her, called her house, told her not to drive that day. She listened, stayed home. Then her best friend borrowed her car, went to the store for her, hit a patch of ice on the same road at the same time. Died instantly. Ray's voice was hollow. The shadow line showed me Mary's car crashing. It didn't care who was driving it, just that the crash happened. I handed the photo back, not knowing what to say. I'm telling you this because you're going to be tempted, Ray continued. You're going to see something terrible in the shadow line, and you're going to think you can prevent it. And maybe you can. But ask yourself, is it worth having someone else pay the price? He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the truck stop like a ghost himself. I sat in my unit for an hour, processing everything he'd told me. The shadow line wasn't showing me possibilities, it was showing me inevitabilities. And the only power I had was to decide who suffered. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the accidents I'd prevented, all the lives I'd saved. Had there been a cost I hadn't seen? Had someone else crashed, someone else died, somewhere down the line? The math was horrifying. 17 saves, 17 transferred fates, 17 people who might have died because I'd played God. I needed proof. I needed to know if Ray was right. Over the next 2 weeks, I did something I never thought I'd do. I tracked down the people I'd saved. The motorcycle rider I'd pulled over, the woman whose car I'd delayed, the truck driver I'd warned about black ice. All 17 of them. What I found made me wish I'd never looked. The motorcycle rider was alive. But 3 days after I'd pulled him over, his younger brother had died in a motorcycle accident. Same highway, different location. The woman whose car I'd delayed, preventing her from hitting a semi, was fine, but her husband had been killed in a workplace accident a week later, crushed by machinery that had never malfunctioned before. The truck driver I'd warned about black ice made it home safe. His best friend died of a heart attack the next morning. Healthy, 42 years old, no history of cardiac issues. One after another, the pattern held. I'd saved them, and someone close to them had died shortly after. Conservation of tragedy. Ray had been right. I was sitting in my unit, staring at my notes, when the radio crackled. All units, we have a situation developing on I-10 eastbound, mile marker 210. Multiple vehicles involved, possible hostage situation. Proceed with extreme caution. I was at mile marker 205 heading east, 5 miles away, and that's when I saw it in the shadow line. The ghost highway appeared, shimmering in the afternoon heat. I could see multiple ghost vehicles stopped in a cluster. A sedan surrounded by 2 trucks, ghost figures moving around, the body language aggressive. And then I saw the gunfire, muzzle flashes from multiple directions, a ghost figure falling, more flashes, more falling. A massacre, right there on I-10. I checked my watch. 3:47 p.m. 15 minutes. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch, Unit 47, I'm 4 minutes out from mile marker 210. What's the situation? Unit 47, we have reports of an armed robbery in progress. Suspects forced a vehicle off the road, driver and passenger being held at gunpoint. Multiple witnesses calling it in. Backup is 12 minutes out. 12 minutes. 3 minutes after the shooting would start. If I followed Ray's advice, I'd wait, let it happen, not interfere, because interfering meant someone else would pay the price. But I could see the ghost victims. A man, a woman, and what looked like a child in the back seat. A family, being robbed at gunpoint on the side of the highway. I had 4 minutes to get there. If I arrived before the shooting started, maybe I could de-escalate. Maybe I could arrest the suspects without violence. Or maybe I'd just transfer those deaths to someone else. The ghost highway showed me the father being shot first. Then the mother. The child somehow survived, cowering in the back seat while the 2 suspects rifled through the car. 3 minutes until I arrived. 15 minutes until the shooting. I could save them. But who would die instead? I thought about Linda, about the bullet she'd taken for me, about all the people I'd saved and all the people who died in their places. And then I thought about my daughter Elena, 16 years old, living in Austin. What if I saved this family and Elena died in a car accident tomorrow? What if the universe took her to balance the books? Could I live with that? My hands tightened on the steering wheel. Mile marker 207. 3 miles to go. 2 minutes until I arrived. 13 minutes until the shooting. I could turn around. I could avoid this. Let the shooting happen. Let those deaths be on the suspects, not on me. But they were already on me, weren't they? I'd seen it coming. I knew it was going to happen. If I did nothing, wasn't I complicit? Mile marker 209. 1 mile. 1 minute until I arrived. 12 minutes until the shooting. I could see the vehicles ahead now. Real ones, not ghosts. A sedan, 2 trucks. Figures standing around. I hit my lights and siren. The suspects saw me coming. One of them raised his weapon, pointing it at the family. A threat. Don't come closer or they die. I stopped 20 yards away, took cover behind my unit. This is the Texas Highway Patrol. Drop your weapons and get on the ground. They didn't move. The one with the gun still had it pointed at the father's head. Standoff. I could see the clock on my dashboard. 4 p.m. 2 minutes until the shooting would start in the ghost timeline. There's nowhere to go, I shouted. Backup is on the way. End this now. The suspect with the gun looked at his partner. They were making a decision. 4:01 p.m., 1 minute. I pulled my service weapon aimed at the suspect with the gun. My hands were steady, my breathing controlled. 15 years of training taking over. Last chance, drop it. 4:02 p.m. In the ghost timeline, this was the moment the shooting started. The suspect lowered his weapon. For a second I thought it was over, thought I'd done it. Changed the outcome without transferring the cost. Then he raised it again, faster, and fired at the father. I fired back. One shot, center mass. The suspect went down. His partner raised his hand, surrendering. I rushed forward, weapon still raised. The partner got on the ground. I cuffed him, then checked the family. The father was hit. Shoulder wound, bleeding heavily, but alive. The mother was screaming, the child was crying. I called for EMS, applied pressure to the wound. The other suspect was dead. My shot had been perfect. Center mass, through the heart. He'd been dead before he hit the ground. Backup arrived 5 minutes later. Paramedics stabilized the father, got him to the hospital. He survived. The whole family survived. I'd changed it. The ghost highway had shown me both parents dead, but I'd saved them. As I watched the ambulance drive away, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Maybe Ray was wrong. Maybe you could change the shadow line's predictions. Maybe there wasn't always a price. I was filling out paperwork at the scene when my phone rang. Personal cell, not the radio. I almost didn't answer. Martinez. Dad? Elena's voice, shaking, terrified. Dad, there's been an accident. Mom, My world stopped. Elena, what happened? We were driving home from the grocery store. A truck ran a red light. It hit us on Mom's side. Dad, she's not moving. The paramedics are here, but she's not moving. I closed my eyes. The truck I'd seen in the ghost highway. One of the suspect's trucks. It should have been here, on I-10, involved in the robbery. But I'd stopped the robbery early. The suspect I'd shot was dead. His truck never made it to this location. But his partner had. The one who'd surrendered. His truck had been impounded as evidence, except there had been a third vehicle. A follow car I hadn't seen in the ghost highway because I'd only been looking at the robbery scene. That vehicle hadn't been at the robbery because I'd arrived early. So it had continued east, through El Paso, through the city streets, to Austin, where my ex-wife and daughter had been driving home from the grocery store. The universe had balanced its books. I'd saved the family on I-10, and I'd lost my ex-wife. Elena, I managed to say, I'm coming. I'll be there as fast as I can. I hung up and got in my unit, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. Ray had been right. The shadow line always got its price. You could choose who paid it, but someone always did. I'd chosen to save strangers, and my ex-wife had paid the cost. As I drove east on I-10, pushing my unit to its limit, the ghost highway appeared one more time. I saw myself, 15 minutes ahead, arriving at the hospital in Austin. Saw Elena in the waiting room. Saw the doctor coming out with that look on his face, the one that says I'm sorry. Saw my life falling apart because I'd thought I could outsmart fate. The ghost highway faded, leaving just the empty road ahead. And I understood finally that Ray Dobbs had tried to warn me, that there was no beating the shadow line. There was only choosing who suffered, and I'd made my choice. Now I had to live with it. My ex-wife Maria died at 4:47 p.m. in an Austin hospital, surrounded by doctors who'd done everything they could. I arrived at 5:15 p.m., 28 minutes too late to say goodbye. Elena was in the waiting room, her face streaked with tears, and when she saw me, she ran into my arms like she hadn't done since she was a little girl. We held each other while the world fell apart around us. The funeral was 3 days later. Captain Reeves gave me a week of bereavement leave. I spent most of it in El Paso with Elena, trying to be the father I'd failed to be for the past 3 years, knowing that no amount of present attention could make up for past absence. She asked me once, late one night when we couldn't sleep, "Do you think it was my fault?" If I hadn't asked Mom to take me to the store, "No," I said immediately, firmly. "This wasn't your fault. It was an accident, a terrible random accident." But it wasn't random. I knew the truth. The truck that had hit them was driven by the partner of the man I'd shot. He'd been trying to escape the scene, fleeing west toward El Paso, and he'd run that red light. I'd created the circumstances that put him in Austin at that exact moment. I'd changed the timeline, shifted the variables, and Maria had paid the price. Conservation of tragedy. After the funeral, Elena went to stay with Maria's sister in San Antonio. I drove back to West Texas, to my empty apartment in Van Horn, to the endless desert highway where all of this had started. I requested to be taken off patrol, desk duty, filing reports, answering phones, anything that kept me away from I-10. Captain Reeves denied the request. "You're one of my best officers, Martinez. I need you out there. Take another week if you need it. But then you're back on the road." "I can't. Not after. Your ex-wife's death was a tragedy, but it wasn't related to your work. The suspect was fleeing a crime scene you stopped. You did your job. You saved a family. That matters." It did matter. Just not in the way he thought. I went back to work 2 weeks after the funeral. First shift back, I was on I-10 before dawn, watching the sun rise over the desert, trying to find some meaning in the endless horizon. The ghost highway appeared almost immediately. I could see shadow vehicles, transparent and 15 minutes ahead, their futures playing out like a preview of inevitability. I watched a shadow truck blow a tire and swerve. 15 minutes later, the real truck blew its tire in the exact same spot. I didn't interfere, I just watched it happen, then called it in after the fact. Ray Dobbs had been right. The only way to avoid making things worse was to do nothing. But doing nothing felt like drowning. Over the next month, I saw 17 accidents in the ghost highway. 17 chances to save lives, 17 opportunities to interfere. I watched them all happen. A teenager texting and drifting into oncoming traffic. Dead at mile marker 167. An elderly couple whose brakes failed on a downhill slope. Dead at mile marker 203. A family whose tire blew at 80 miles per hour. 3 dead, 1 survivor. Mile marker 189. I saw them all coming. I did nothing, and I hated myself for it. Linda came back to work 6 weeks after her shooting. Her shoulder was healed, but she moved carefully, protecting it. We didn't talk about what had happened. She assumed I felt guilty for not being there. I let her assume that because the truth was worse. We were partners again, working the same stretch of highway. And every day I saw the ghost highway showing me futures I couldn't prevent. Then, one Tuesday morning in November, everything changed. I was at mile marker 201, watching eastbound traffic, when the ghost highway showed me something new, my own patrol unit. Unit 47. Ghost Jake Martinez pulling over a sedan on the shoulder. I watched as Ghost Me approached the driver's window. Watched as the driver pulled a gun. Watched as I was shot 3 times and fell to the pavement. Watched as the shooter drove away, leaving my ghost body bleeding out on the shoulder. The ghost highway faded. I checked my watch. 11:47 a.m. 15 minutes. This wasn't like the last time I'd seen my own death. Last time, I'd run from it, changed my position, and Linda had taken my place. This time was different, because this time I understood the rules. If I avoided this stop, someone else would make it. Maybe Linda, maybe another officer, but someone would die at noon on this highway. The shadow line had shown me a death, my death, and if I tried to avoid it, the universe would just substitute someone else. I could accept my fate, or I could transfer it. Those were the only choices. I sat in my unit, hands trembling, staring at the clock. 11:49 a.m. 13 minutes. I could call in sick, drive to the station, get off this highway, let someone else handle this sector. But then Linda would respond to the call, or another officer, and they would die instead of me. Or I could stay. Let it play out, let the shadow line take what it wanted. Except that wasn't acceptable either. I had a daughter. Elena needed me, especially now that she'd lost her mother. How could I choose to die when she needed me to live? 11 minutes. My radio crackled. All units, we have a disabled vehicle reported at mile marker 201 eastbound. Black sedan. Driver appears intoxicated. Units, please respond. Mile marker 201. Where I was parked. My throat went dry. This was it. The call that would lead to the stop that would lead to my death. Unit 47, I'm at mile marker 201, I said into the radio. I'll check it out. Copy, Unit 47. I sat there for another minute gathering my courage. 11:52 a.m. 10 minutes until I was shot. I could still drive away. Radio that I'd been called to another location. Let the next unit handle it. But I didn't, because I'd spent the past month watching people die in accidents I could have prevented, and I was tired of being a coward. If the shadow line wanted me dead, then I'd meet it head on. I pulled onto the shoulder and started scanning for the sedan. The ghost highway had shown it as a black four-door, newer model. I drove slowly, watching. 11:54 a.m. 8 minutes there. A black sedan pulled onto the shoulder about a quarter-mile ahead. Engine running, driver slumped over the wheel. I called it in. Dispatch, Unit 47, I've got visual on the vehicle, checking on driver welfare. Copy, Unit 47, backup is 15 minutes out. 15 minutes. I'd be dead by then. I activated my body camera, put on my hat, and approached the vehicle. Every step felt surreal, like walking through a dream or a nightmare. I reached the driver's window and tapped on it. Sir, this is the highway patrol. Are you all right? The driver stirred, lifted his head. Young guy, maybe 30, with bloodshot eyes and a 3-day beard. He looked at me with confusion that slowly morphed into recognition, and then into terror. He fumbled for something in the passenger seat. I saw the movement, my training kicking in. Sir, keep your hands where I can see them. He pulled up a gun, pointed it at me through the window. Time slowed down. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Saw the muzzle flash. Felt the impact, once, twice, 3 times. Just like the shadow highway had shown me. I fell backward, hitting the pavement hard. My chest was on fire. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. The sedan's engine roared, tires squealing. The shooter was fleeing. I lay there staring up at the blue Texas sky, feeling my life drain away onto the hot asphalt. So this was how it ended. On I-10, mile marker 201, at noon on a Tuesday. Exactly as the shadow line had predicted. I'd accepted my fate. Hadn't tried to transfer it. Maybe that meant something. Maybe Elena would understand that I'd died trying to do the right thing. My vision was fading. The sky was getting darker. And then I heard tires. A vehicle stopping. Doors opening. Officer down! Officer down! Hands on me, checking wounds, applying pressure. The pain was excruciating. Stay with me, Martinez. Ambulance is on the way. Linda's voice. Linda was here. But how? Backup was supposed to be 15 minutes out. I was 2 miles behind you, she was saying, her hands covered in my blood. When you called in the stop, I headed your way. Jake, stay with me. Don't you dare die on me. I tried to speak, but couldn't. The darkness was closing in. I'd been wrong. The shadow line hadn't shown me Linda arriving. It had only shown me being shot and falling. It hadn't shown the whole future. Maybe there were gaps. Maybe there were possibilities the shadow line didn't show. Or maybe this was just delaying the inevitable. Maybe I'd die in the ambulance or in surgery, and the shadow line would still be proven right. The darkness took me. I woke up 3 days later in an El Paso hospital. Linda was sitting in a chair beside my bed, reading a magazine. When she saw my eyes open, she dropped the magazine and grabbed my hand. "Welcome back, partner." My chest was a mass of bandages and pain. I tried to speak, but my throat was too dry. "Don't talk, just listen. You were hit 3 times. 2 caught the vest, 1 went through your side. You lost a lot of blood, but you're going to be okay." I managed to croak out one word. "Shooter? In custody. Turns out he was wanted for murder in New Mexico. Killed his girlfriend, been on the run for 2 weeks. When he saw your uniform, he panicked. He thought you'd run his plates, figured out who he was." Linda shook her head. "You were just checking on what you thought was a drunk driver. Wrong place, wrong time. Wrong place, wrong time. The story of my life." "Elena's here," Linda continued. "She's been by your side every day. She's in the cafeteria getting coffee. She'll be so happy you're awake." Elena. My daughter. I'd survived for her. Over the next week, I learned the details. The 3 bullets that hit me should have been fatal. 2 had struck my vest, cracking ribs but not penetrating. The 3rd had entered my side at an angle, missing vital organs by inches. The doctor called it a miracle. Linda called it luck. I called it something else. The shadow line had shown me being shot and falling. It hadn't shown me dying. I'd assumed the worst, but the shadow line had only shown me what was certain, not what was possible. Maybe that was the key. The shadow line showed inevitabilities, but it didn't show probabilities. It didn't show the outcomes that depended on chance, on split-second decisions, on variables it couldn't predict. Linda arriving early was one of those variables. The bullet missing my organs was another. The shadow line had shown me my fate, but it hadn't shown me all of it. When I was released from the hospital 3 weeks later, Captain Reeves offered me permanent desk duty. No more highway patrol. No more I-10. I accepted. But the shadow line didn't care where I worked. It didn't care that I wasn't on the highway anymore. Because 2 days after I started my desk job, sitting in an office in El Paso, I saw it again. The ghost highway appeared on the wall of my office like a projection. I could see shadow vehicles, shadow accidents, shadow deaths. 15 minutes into the future, playing out on a road I was no longer patrolling. The shadow line had followed me. And as I watched a ghost semi-truck jackknife and roll at mile marker 177, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The shadow line wasn't tied to the highway. It wasn't tied to me being a patrol officer. It was tied to me. I could see 15 minutes into the future anywhere, anytime. I just never noticed before because I'd always been on I-10. The shadow line wasn't a phenomenon I'd discovered. It was a curse I'd been given, and I was never going to be free of it. As I watched the real semi-truck jackknife 15 minutes later, exactly where the shadow had shown me, I understood the terrible truth. The shadow line wasn't showing me the future so I could change it. It was showing me the future so I'd know I couldn't. It was a punishment. For every time I'd interfered, every death I'd transferred, every price someone else had paid for my choices, the shadow line was making sure I witnessed every consequence, making sure I knew that all the suffering I'd tried to prevent was still happening, just differently, making sure I understood that I hadn't saved anyone. I'd only redistributed the pain. And now I'd spend the rest of my life watching it play out, 15 minutes at a time, powerless to stop it. The shadow line had won. and I was its prisoner forever. I lived with the shadow line for 3 months after leaving the highway. Every day, at my desk in El Paso, I'd see it. Ghost vehicles on ghost roads, transparent people living out transparent futures 15 minutes before reality caught up. The shadow line followed me everywhere, an unwanted gift I couldn't return. Elena moved in with me after I recovered. She'd deferred college, said she wanted to be close to family after losing her mother. I think she was really worried I'd have a breakdown. She wasn't wrong to worry. Every morning I'd see shadow versions of Elena eating breakfast. I'd watch her ghost pour cereal 15 minutes before she actually did it. I'd see her shadow self leave for her part-time job, drive away, return home. All of it playing out like a preview I couldn't skip. It was maddening. "Dad, you okay?" Elena asked one evening, catching me staring at nothing. At the shadow version of her reading a book on the couch, while the real her stood in the doorway. "Yeah, just tired. You've been staring a lot lately. Maybe you should talk to someone. The department has counselors." "I'm fine, sweetie." But I wasn't fine. The shadow line was showing me more than just accidents now. It was showing me everything. Every mundane moment, every small decision, every path taken and not taken. My life had become a constant preview, robbing me of any spontaneity, any surprise. I knew what Elena would say 15 minutes before she said it. I knew what the weather would do, what calls would come in, what coffee I'd make for myself. 15 minutes isn't much, but it's enough to drain all the meaning out of living. After 6 weeks of desk duty, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to Captain Reeves. "I need to go back to the highway." He looked up from his paperwork, surprised. "Martinez, you were shot 3 times. You have a desk job now. Most officers would kill for that." "I'm going crazy behind a desk. I need to be out there." "You sure this isn't about your ex-wife? About trying to find some kind of closure?" "It's about doing the job I'm trained for. I'm a highway patrol officer, not a clerk." Reeves studied me for a long moment. "All right, but you're not going back alone. Linda will be your partner, and you're both staying on the eastern sector, away from where the shooting happened. We'll ease you back in." I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt a creeping dread. The shadow line was strongest on the highway. If it was following me even off the road, what would happen when I went back? I found out 2 days later. Linda and I were on patrol, heading west on I-10 near mile marker 240, when the shadow line appeared with an intensity I'd never experienced before. It wasn't just showing me ghost vehicles anymore. It was showing me a second highway, parallel to the real one, existing 15 minutes in the future. I could see both realities at once, the current highway and the shadow highway, overlapping like double vision, and in the shadow highway, I saw something that made me slam on the brakes. At mile marker 248, 15 minutes ahead, there was an accident. A massive pileup involving 7 vehicles. The shadow highway showed me cars burning, people trapped, bodies on the pavement. A catastrophe. "Jake, what are you doing?" Linda asked, as I pulled onto the shoulder. I couldn't answer. I was watching the shadow accident unfold, watching shadow paramedics arriving, shadow firefighters battling shadow flames. The pileup started with a semi-truck losing control. I could see the sequence clearly. The truck driver looked down at his phone, drifted into the next lane, overcorrected, jackknifed across 3 lanes. The vehicles behind him couldn't stop in time. 7 cars, 9 people dead, dozens injured. All of it happening in the shadow highway, right now. In 15 minutes it would happen in reality. Unless I stopped it. "Jake?" Linda's voice was concerned now. "What's wrong?" "There's going to be an accident at mile marker 248. A bad one. Multiple vehicles. How do you know that? I couldn't tell her the truth. I have a feeling. We need to get ahead of traffic, create a rolling roadblock, slow everyone down. Linda looked skeptical, but she trusted me. All right, let's do it. We pulled back onto the highway and accelerated, passing the vehicles that would soon be involved in the pileup. When we reached mile marker 245, I activated my lights and moved into the left lane, slowing gradually. Traffic behind us slowed too. The vehicles that should have been at mile marker 248 in 15 minutes were now stuck behind us, moving at 50 miles per hour instead of 80. We held the rolling roadblock for 10 minutes, then let traffic pass. By the time the semi-truck that should have caused the accident reached mile marker 248, the other vehicles weren't in position. The truck drifted, overcorrected, but there were no cars beside it to hit. It fishtailed, straightened out, and kept going. No accident, no pileup, no deaths. I'd prevented it. Linda looked at me with a mixture of confusion and respect. How did you know? I didn't. I just had a feeling. But I had known. The shadow line had shown me. And for the first time since Maria's death, I'd used that knowledge to prevent a tragedy without anyone dying in their place. Or so I thought. 2 hours later, we got the call. Multiple vehicle accident at mile marker 287. 7 cars involved, 9 fatalities. The exact same accident I'd prevented just 40 miles down the road and 2 hours later. The universe had delayed it, moved it, but it had still collected its due. I pulled over on the shoulder and put my head in my hands. Jake? Linda's voice was distant. Are you okay? I wasn't okay. I would never be okay again. Because I finally understood what the shadow line really was. It wasn't showing me the future so I could prevent it. It was showing me the future so I'd know that prevention was impossible. Every accident, every death, every tragedy I saw in the shadow highway was inevitable. Not because fate was absolute, but because the universe was balanced. Conservation of tragedy wasn't just a theory. It was a law, as immutable as gravity. You could delay death. Move it. Transfer it. But you couldn't eliminate it. The shadow line was showing me this truth over and over, making sure I understood that my efforts were futile, that all my attempts to save people were just cosmic shell games, moving tragedy from one location to another. I spent that night researching. Old accident reports from Interstate 10 going back to 1952, when Ray Dobbs had first seen the shadow line. I was looking for patterns, for proof of what I suspected. I found it. Every time there was a significant dip in accident fatalities on one stretch of I-10, there was a corresponding spike somewhere else. Not immediately, not obviously, but within days or weeks. The numbers always balanced out. Conservation of tragedy, written in blood and statistics. But there was something else. Something I hadn't expected. The shadow line itself was getting stronger. In 1952, Ray Dobbs could see 15 minutes ahead. In 1999, I could see 15 minutes ahead. But according to the patterns in the data, the preview window was growing. By my calculations, within 10 years, someone would be able to see 30 minutes ahead. Within 20 years, an hour. And the further ahead you could see, the more you could interfere. And the more you interfered, the worse the conservation effect became. The shadow line wasn't just a phenomenon. It was escalating. I found Ray Dobbs 2 days later. He was living in a nursing home in El Paso, 87 years old and barely coherent. But when I mentioned the shadow line, his eyes cleared. "You figured it out," he said, "that it's getting stronger." "Yes, why is it getting stronger?" Because we keep trying to change it. Every time someone sees the shadow line and interferes, they create a ripple, a disturbance in the probability field. The universe tries to correct it, but the correction creates more disturbances. It's a feedback loop. So the more we try to prevent accidents, the worse it gets. Not just worse, wider. The shadow line is spreading. In 1952, it was just me. Then I retired and I thought it was over. But it found you, and when you retire, it'll find someone else. Each time it gets stronger. Each time the preview window gets longer. Eventually, someone's going to be able to see days ahead, then weeks, then months. And the conservation effect? Ray's face was grim. Gets worse too. Right now, if you save someone, the death happens elsewhere. But when the shadow line gets strong enough, when someone can see far enough ahead, the conservation will become immediate. Save one person, someone else dies instantly. No delay, no distance. Direct transfer. How do we stop it? We don't. The shadow line is a consequence of the atomic tests. They split atoms in the desert, and they split something else too. Probability, time, reality. The shadow line is the wound trying to heal, but every time we interfere, we keep the wound open. So we just accept it, watch people die and do nothing, or we close the wound. How? Ray pulled out a folded piece of paper from his nightstand drawer. It was yellowed, fragile, covered in notes and diagrams. I spent 30 years researching this. The shadow line originates from a specific point. Mile marker 0 on I-10, right at the New Mexico border. That's the closest point to the Nevada test site. That's where the probability field is thinnest. Ground zero for the shadow line. He handed me the paper. I studied the diagrams. They showed the highway, radiation patterns, temporal distortion fields. If you go to mile marker 0 at the exact moment when the shadow line is showing you the future, you can cross over. Step into the shadow highway. Exist 15 minutes ahead of reality. What good does that do? The shadow highway is the wound, the gap between what is and what will be. If you enter it and stay there, you remove yourself from the equation. No more interference, no more ripples. The wound can finally close. You mean, live in the shadow highway? Forever? Forever, 15 minutes ahead of everyone else. You'd see the future, always, but you'd never be part of the present. You'd be a ghost, watching the world happen but never participating. Ray's eyes were sad. I almost did it, back in 1967, after my daughter died. Figured I'd caused enough damage, but I was too much of a coward. I looked at the diagrams again. If I did this, would it stop? Would the shadow line stop spreading? Eventually. It might take years, decades, but without interference, the wound would heal. The shadow line would fade. No more preview, no more conservation of tragedy, just normal causality. And I'd be stuck 15 minutes ahead forever. Or until you die, whichever comes first. I left the nursing home with Ray's notes, my mind racing. I could end this. I could stop the shadow line from spreading, save future officers from this curse. All I had to do was exile myself from reality. Live the rest of my life 15 minutes in the future. Never able to interact with anyone. Never able to be with Elena. I drove to mile marker 0 that night. It was at the Texas-New Mexico border, a desolate stretch of highway with nothing but desert on both sides. I parked on the shoulder and waited. At midnight, the shadow highway appeared. Stronger here than anywhere else. I could see it clearly. A perfect overlay of the future 15 minutes ahead. All I had to do was step onto the shadow highway. One step, and I'd cross over. One step, and I'd be gone from reality forever. I thought about Elena, about Linda, about all the people I'd tried to save and all the people who died because of my interference. I thought about Maria, killed by a truck that was fleeing a scene I'd created. I thought about the future officers who would inherit this curse if I didn't end it now. And then I saw her, Elena, in the Shadow Highway. Shadow Elena, 15 minutes ahead, driving her car on I-10. I watched as Shadow Elena saw my parked patrol car, pulled over, got out. She was coming to check on me. In 15 minutes, the real Elena would do the same. She'd track my GPS, see I was at mile marker 0 in the middle of the night, and she'd worry. She'd drive out here to make sure I was okay. If I crossed over to the Shadow Highway now, I'd be there when she arrived. But I'd be 15 minutes ahead. I'd see her, but she wouldn't see me. I'd watch her search for me, call my name, panic when she couldn't find me. I'd watch my daughter grieve for a father who was standing right next to her, invisible, untouchable. I couldn't do that to her. I put the car in drive and headed back to El Paso. I resigned from the highway patrol the next week. Told Captain Reeves I needed to focus on Elena, on being a father. It was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth was that I couldn't keep fighting the shadow line. I couldn't prevent accidents without causing others. I couldn't save lives without costing lives, and I couldn't exile myself to the Shadow Highway without abandoning my daughter. So I quit. Walked away from the highway, from the shadow line, from all of it. But the shadow line didn't walk away from me. Even now, 25 years later, I still see it. 15 minutes into the future, every day, all the time. I see shadow people living shadow lives, making shadow choices. I've learned to ignore most of it. Learned to live in the present moment, to not look too far ahead. The Shadow Highway is still there, on I-10, showing futures to anyone unlucky enough to see it. I know because I check the accident statistics. The pattern is still there. The conservation of tragedy, balancing the books. And the preview window is still growing. By now, it's probably up to 30 minutes, maybe more. Someday, someone will see far enough ahead that they'll think they can prevent anything, save everyone. And they'll learn the same lesson I did. The shadow line doesn't show you the future, so you can change it. It shows you the future so you'll know you can't. Fate isn't about what happens. It's about what happens instead. And the shadow line makes sure you witness every substitution, every transferred tragedy, every cost of your interference. It makes sure you know that you didn't save anyone. You just chose who suffered. I live in El Paso now, in a small house with Elena and her 2 children, my grandchildren. I see their shadow selves 15 minutes before they do things. Shadow granddaughter spilling juice before real granddaughter does it. Shadow grandson laughing at a joke 15 minutes before anyone tells it. The shadow line has stolen the joy of surprise from my life. But it's given me something too. The knowledge that every moment, even the difficult ones, passes. 15 minutes from now, this moment will be memory, and 15 minutes from then, it'll be further in the past. The shadow line taught me that the future is always coming, always inevitable, always exactly 15 minutes away. And all we can do is witness it, accept it, and try not to make it worse by thinking we can control it. Sometimes, Elena catches me staring at nothing, seeing things she can't see. She asks if I'm okay. I tell her I'm fine. 15 minutes later, I tell her again, and again, 15 minutes after that. Living my life in preview, forever watching the future arrive on schedule, powerless to change anything that matters. The shadow line won, and I surrendered. Because sometimes the only way to stop making things worse is to stop trying to make them better. The shadow highway is still out there on I-10, showing futures to whoever can see them. Maybe someday, someone will figure out how to close the wound, how to stop the preview, how to end the curse. But it won't be me. I'm just a retired cop who can see 15 minutes ahead, and I've learned to live with it. Because the alternative, crossing over to the shadow highway and living forever in the future, forever apart from the people I love, is worse than any curse. So I stay in the present. I hug my grandchildren. I talk to Elena. I live each moment as it comes, even though I've already seen it coming. The shadow line showed me the truth about fate. It's not about destiny, it's about acceptance, and I finally learned to accept.